Welcome to John Martin Talks, where we battle ignorance and apathy daily. The growing ignorance of just how special this experiment we call the United States of America is, and the apathy that we can't or won't do anything and everything to save her. Well, a good Friday morning to you. I hope you're looking forward to the weekend. Of course, most of the nation is sheltering at home, and we're doing that in the good old Fort Hawthorne, as I call it, here in the great state of Florida. I am truly blessed. I have a great family, a loving wife, a beautiful little dog that loves me, a swimming pool. I'm living the good life right now, and we're all healthy. And I don't know how wealthy we are, but we're truly blessed, there's no doubt. And I hope that you are too. As I say at the end of my show, and I'll say it right now, I pray for your family. You pray for mine. Well, we're going to talk about, of course, the coronavirus, but we're going to talk about some things that are a little bit different, and hopefully you'll enjoy them, because I know that everybody's talking about the death toll and all that on a day-to-day basis, and all of that certainly matters, but I want to talk about a few topics that you might not have on your radar screen that are being affected by the coronavirus. First of all, oil, the energy sector. Oil is at $20 a barrel right now. Oil prices, gas prices are as low as many people have ever seen them, certainly not myself. I think the lowest I ever saw was like $25.9 back in the early 70s. But gas prices are dropping dramatically, and they're probably going to continue to drop, but that may not be as good a thing as it first appears, and we'll expand on that in just a moment. And then the Democrats. They're already thinking about 2024. I don't know if they've cashed in on 2020, but they're already thinking about 2024, and they're looking at the governors in places like Washington State, of course, Andrew Cuomo, right? Now, Mario, he's dead and gone. But Cuomo, the governor of New York, and of course, Gavin Newsom and the lady from Michigan. The governors are jumping to the forefront here, and they're creating a farm team of such that the Democrats have not had in the past. We'll expand upon that. And then I want to read you an opinion piece that's pretty interesting, and it's actually by a very progressive writer, but they're making a case that the media is making a big mistake in not trying to cover President Trump's pressures. And he gives you a different perspective, and it's pretty interesting. So we'll get into that. But we start with the oil sector. And this comes to you from a CNBC article. Saudi Arabia's big oil gamble will hurt the kingdom, but it'll likely pay off. And this is a CNBC article. April is likely to be a hellish month for the oil industry. And that's probably true. And this is worldwide. But it's especially true if you care about the MAGA agenda, America First. And you may be wondering, well, why would that be bad for Americans? Because we're able to get cheap gas. Well, first of all, there ain't anywhere to go, which is kind of ironic. We got the cheapest gas we've had in decades now, but we can't really go anywhere. So it's kind of a punishment there to a certain extent. But it's not necessarily good for America's long-term health of our economy. And I'll expand on that in just a moment. Already down more than 65% year to date, talking about the price of a barrel of oil, crushed by the coronavirus crisis and the Saudi, this is not getting much attention, but the Saudi-Russia war, so to speak. They're having a war over oil right now, and not a shooting war, but they're firing bullets of barrels of oil, so to speak. Crude prices are set to tank even further. So watch for them drop. There's some people talking about them getting down, the price of oil getting into the single digits, which is pretty amazing if you think about it. But set to take even further when Saudi Arabia and others, basically OPEC, open up the taps following the expiration of OPEC output deal that was cut last year that had reined in production to boost the market. Now, the U.S. just recently, under the leadership of Donald Trump, President Trump, has become the #1 producer of oil and energy and natural gas in the world. A lot of people don't seem to know that, but we had reached #1, baby. for the first time I really remember. I mean, you got to probably go back to the 60s or 70s when we were number one, and maybe even further back than that. We've been reliant on foreign oil for a long, long time, some of it intentional and some of it not. But we've been energy independent for the first time that I really ever remember being totally energy dependent. And that is a big deal. It's one of the reasons why the economy has just been going gangbusters before this coronavirus. One of the biggest employers of new high-paying jobs was the oil sector. That is all on the verge of going away. And that's the big issue, and we'll get into that. Oil at $20 a barrel was unimaginable a few months ago, no doubt. And now some forecasters are calling prices as low as $10 and even single digits, as I said. As the world runs out of storage space, there's no place to put it because there's not that big a demand for it right now. Because as the economy goes, oil goes and vice versa. There is a definite link there. Storage space and global economy grinds to a halt. Now, ladies and gentlemen, this could actually lead to revolution in places like Russia, because Russia's whole economy is based primarily on being the gas tank for the EU. You know, and I talked about this before, but if I say it, it bears repeating. You know, it talks about Russia, and the conspiracy and all that Russia hoax, and they talk about President Trump going over and bashing the NATO allies about paying their fair share and all that. But what no one seems to want to talk about is the main reason that Russia is still alive and well and that Putin is still at the top. It's not because he's in a love bromance with Donald Trump. It's a love affair between Angela Merkel of Germany, the Chancellor of Germany, or the Prime Minister in this day. Chancellor is a different term, right? Hopefully, even though she is from East Germany, but that's another story. But she's been propping up Putin for quite some time. And that never gets mentioned. It's always about Trump and his supposedly in the pocket of Putin. But let me tell you, there is no closer love affair than Putin and Merkel. That's for sure. So if oil prices continue to drop, then basically Russia's economy, which is fragile to start with, will be in complete tatters. And that actually might not be good for the world. I know Putin, people is a dictator. They want to get rid of him. But we've seen that getting rid of dictators is not always in our best interest. And I'm not wishing any ill on the Russian people whatsoever. And Saudi Arabia, the crown prince there now is there's some palace intrigue. There's some Game of Thrones stuff going on there. He just arrested a lot of his kinfolk. So there are things happening in Saudi Arabia. They're not as stable as they once were. And so if oil, even though they're kind of dominating the market and manipulating this thing, if the market totally crashes, that might be in the long-term interest of Saudi Arabia, and we'll expand on that in just a moment. But in the short term, it could be the end of the House of Saud or whatever. So, and I don't even get me started on Iran. Iran has been suffering. I tell you the truth. I very much feel for the Iranian people. I mean, they're being misled. They're obviously going through hell right now with this coronavirus. And Iran used to be one of the jewels of, the Persian people. I mean, amazing people that created the Persian Empire. And they used to be close friends of the United States. And a lot of Iranians still actually look to the United States for leadership, but they're afraid, and you can't necessarily blame them. But this oil deal could dramatically affect Iran even more, and their economy is essentially tanking now. So this thing could have ramifications. In the United States, it would have major economic ramifications. I don't know about revolutionary, although when people are suffering economically, which is the biggest fear I have about this coronavirus, people who are suffering economically do desperate things. Desperate people take desperate measures, and we don't want to see that in our country. But when the dust settles, back to the article, many analysts believe it'll be Saudi Arabia, even with its overwhelming reliance on oil revenue, that comes out on top. And so why is that? Well, first of all, they've got a huge supply still, and it's much easier to pump the oil from Saudi Arabia. Their cost per barrel is among the lowest in the world, much lower than ours. So when the price goes down, they still make a profit. The problem for us here in the United States is the reason we became energy independent, much to the chagrin of Ocasio-Cortez, is things like fracking and oil sands and those types of things that were happening in Canada, and there's some of that in the United States as well. Those types of production are what made us number one again and made us energy independent, but they are much more costly than the price to produce in a place like Saudi Arabia and some other places in the world, including Russia. So if the price continues to drop, and it's already really at that level now, it's not really profitable for our oil companies to continue to produce. And one thing that rarely gets talked about, and of course Ocasio-Cortez and her bunch never address this, and Bernie Sanders, they always talk about the big oil companies, the Exxon Mobil and Standard Oil, all of that kind of stuff. And there it is true that the major oil companies of the world are, headquartered here in the United States of America. But what really makes us the number one producer is small companies that go out and explore these wells. There's multiple ways they do it. In fact, when an oil production field gets to a certain point, there's a calculation that major oil companies actually sell those. Even though there's still a lot of oil there, they sell them to smaller, like wildcat companies, I guess is the term, and they continue to make those fields profitable, because at some point it gets to it doesn't make economic sense for the big oil companies, so they keep moving. So I say all that to say that our energy industry, especially oil and natural gas, the smaller players are the big deal and the major employers inside the continental United States, and they are threatened to go away. I'm not worried about Exxon Mobil, and I'm not opposed to them, but they're going to be there. They have assets all over the world, but these smaller companies, sometimes with only like 20 to 100 employees, they not only could shut down, but never come back, because it's hard to restart that stuff. The kingdom, talking about Saudi Arabia, is willingly inflicting pain upon itself by slashing its selling prices and committing to increase production to more than 12 million barrels a day, a record amount after a bid to cut output together with Russia failed. So they tried to team up with Russia, it failed, and now they're against each other. Its strategy, talking about Saudi Arabia, is now going after market share. So that's the big deal. They're trying to capture more and more market share. So they're willing to forego profits for market share. And that's where it impacts these fracking companies, these oil sands companies, and that type of stuff. And like I say, it's going to hurt Canada as well. Now, some of the technology has improved about what I'm about to say, but there are oil wells that if you shut them down, certain types of oil wells, that they can't bring them back into production. It has to do with the pressure, that if they quit pumping, they're gone. They can't get them back. Now, technology may improve and has improved to make that so, but there are still oil wells that are producing that if they shut them down, they're not coming back. According to Abaha Rajenadran, I hope I said that right, Director of Research at Energy Intelligence, he said, Saudi will definitely be one of the winners on the other side. His call is based on the assumption that oil prices will rebound in 2021 post-coronavirus. I hope he's right about post-corona. I'm not exactly sure about that. His firm sees oil back up to $80 a barrel within 3 years. Now, that, ladies and gentlemen, has good and bad consequences. As I say, keeping oil at a very low price, it's good for the consumer short term, but it is ultimately going to destroy our energy sector and make it where it might not be able to come back, certainly to the point that it has, making us the number one producer and totally energy independent. We could, if this is what Saudi Arabia's strategy is, they want to bring us back to the mercy of their decisions, so that if $80 oil comes back, that they can dictate the flow, the price, and everything else. They can't right now because we're still producing. But if we go back to the way we were, say, 5 years ago, let alone a decade ago, they could dictate the world market and we could be at their mercy again, which would not be good for the good old USA. Because oil production, as I say, it cannot be turned on and off like a light switch, not in our country for sure. The full economic blow of the global lockdowns hasn't registered yet. Analysts at Dubai-based Bank Emirates NBD warned that it will kick in this quarter with a level of demand destruction likely to permanently alter the long-term trajectory of oil consumption. So what they're saying is we really haven't seen the full impact of this coronavirus on the energy sector yet. We're seeing signs of it, but it is going to be bad and going to get worse in the short and maybe for the foreseeable future. It could have lasting impact. So here's some questions I have, some words and some comments and some ideas. After this virus, there's some questions. Will the oil sector rebound? Certainly it will rebound to a point. The question really is how fast, because I don't believe the economy is just going to be turned on like a light switch. Do I believe that President Donald Trump is the right man to lead us out of this, not only the virus, but the virus that's plaguing the economy as well? Yes, there's no question about it. But I'll give you a quick example. For instance, and I have no inside information, this is speculated, opinionated. I hope it's not fact, but I think it is. I think, for instance, like the NFL and college football and sports in general, they're not just going to snap back on just because the virus is downplayed. And a couple of things. One, it's just hard to turn that back on. But think about this. Ask yourself this. And I'm a huge college football fan and to a lesser extent pro. I don't know that if the virus were to taper off, say over the summer, that I'm just going to be ready to jump in and be shoulder to shoulder with 80,000 people again. I mean, I don't know that that would be wise. I think it'd be prudent to kind of stay back. There's going to be elements of that, plus the fact that people may be hurting financially that are going to impact businesses across the board. So even though this virus could go down quite a bit, and I hope it does, doesn't mean, and I'm not trying to be gloom and doom, I'm just trying to be factual, doesn't mean the economy is just going to go in reverse portion to it. As I say, we got the best man for the job, no doubt about it. The best shot we have is DJT. Now the world, and I've been saying this for a while, although I haven't said it lately, but if I say it, it bears repeating. The world is better off with a strong United States of America, especially if you're a freedom-seeking person. If you believe in capitalism, if you believe in freedom, or you don't have it and you're trying to get it, having the world, I'm not saying be the policeman of the world, but having the United States as the strongest country in the world, I have to just say it, and I guess I'm biased, but it's better for everybody. It always has been. And so what can we do? Well, first of all, the America First agenda looks a whole lot better right now than it ever did before. And it always looked great, but now everybody is realizing that DJT has been right all along. So, we need to put America First in this as well. The first thing, and President Trump has already started doing this, I would encourage him to continue to do it and fill up our strategic reserves. Buy while the price is low and fill up our strategic reserves. But here's the thing that I would ask the president to do, and maybe I'm wrong, maybe it's more complicated, but I'm just throwing this out there. How about, as part of this recovery package, that we only start buying, at least for a short period of time, I don't know how long, only from U.S. producers? How about that? How about instead, and of course we can export, but how about buying all of our energy from U.S. producers? How about that? And if we have maybe aid packages to somebody, maybe we could put that as a string to it. A quid pro quo, dare I say. Buy energy from us rather than buying it from the Saudi Arabias. And the other thing is, we need to really look at the consequences, the true consequences, if we ever implemented the Green New Deal, within the next 10 years. I'm not opposed to alternative energy. If they come up with something that's better than fossil fuels, man, I am down with you. But right now, if it weren't for fossil fuels, we would be looking at the end of New York City. I'm telling you as it is. because without fossil fuels, there'd be no hospital ship up there. There'd be no trucks bringing in supplies, medical supplies, the ventilators they're talking about, all that kind of thing. They're coming from fossil fuels. It's just reality. So if you're for the Green New Deal, and I'm not criticizing you for trying to be less pollution, I'm all for that. But we have to be realistic. And everybody that ran for president, including old Joe Biden, they're all for the Green New Deal. I haven't said this in a while, but they're all what I would call jackasses on jackasses. Because the Democratic Party, if they were true to themselves and they really believed in the Green New Deal, they couldn't have had debates because they'd have had to have been riding donkeys to get there. That's just the way it is. All right, we're going to move along, but I wanted to put that story on your radar screen because our energy sector is vital to the security of this nation, and it is in peril at the moment. So I'm all for, believe me, I love pumping my fuel and looking and say, man, I'm getting twice as much fuel, for the money. I'm all for that, but keep in mind that it could have very negative consequences down the line for our security. All right, we're gonna. Oh, and before I go any further, let me mention something that I brought up first yesterday, and I've had a lot of response on Facebook, so I want to clarify a few things. We are about to launch some shirts that you'll be able to get on our website. We're not quite prepared yet. People have asked me about the price. All of that should be coming sometime early next week. But the idea behind these shirts is to, yes, I'm going to admit I am a capitalist and make a little profit to help support our show, but a part of those proceeds are going to go to charity, and they're going to go to, I hope they will go to coronavirus related charities like first responders. So one of the things I'm asking you to do is whatever Facebook network you're listening to right now, chime in on the comments section and let me know about charities in your area, in your region, in your state that you think are worthy. And do a little research, so it helps me out. Of course, we're going to do our own research because we're not going to be victim of scams. But I would love to have you support us and help us support the people that are literally saving lives. So chime in on that. Let me know. Coronavirus puts governors back in presidential pipeline, according to Politico. Now, if you notice, governors did not fare too well in the 2020 election for the Democratic primary. There were 3 or 4 or 5, some of them you can't even remember, most of them. Now, Inslee in Washington, do you remember he ran for president and now he's being held up as somebody in the future? All the governors, man, half of them didn't even make the first debate. So governors have been way out of style. They used to be in style. Governors used to be one of the top choices for running for president, but they're out of style. Maybe they're coming back. So let's expand on that. This is a Politico article. Coronavirus puts governors back in presidential pipeline. Andrew Cuomo's poll ratings are soaring. I mean, we're seeing him 24/7, right? Jay Inslee, you might say, who? He's governor of Washington State, is drawing more attention than his failed president campaign ever did. But that wouldn't be hard to do. Gretchen Whitmire, you may be wondering what she is. You may hear, a Biden-Whitmire ticket. She is the current governor of Michigan. It says she is burnishing her credentials as a possible running mate for Joe Biden. So apparently Joe picking a woman for his vice president, he made that statement, guaranteed that he would in the last presidential debate, of primary debate, shall we say, between him and Bernie, which may be the last one. There's supposed to be a primary next week in Wisconsin. We'll see how it goes. But Biden made the statement that he's definitely going to pick a woman. And at first I was thinking he might try to pick somebody like Kamala Harris and that kind of thing. But this lady, let me say her name again, Gretchen Whitmire, might be the one that he's doing. And in fact, there are people who are saying the only thing keeping Biden afloat right now is his commitment to pick a woman. I got no issue with a woman being vice president. I got no issue with a woman being president. In fact, man, I am hoping that Miss Sarah Huckabee Sanders one day runs for president. I'd vote for her in a heartbeat. My problem is just picking someone based on their gender. I mean, that just doesn't make sense to me. I'm not saying women aren't fully capable. As I said, I'm all for Sarah. But just to say, okay, I'm going to pick somebody based on something other than their qualifications to be president makes no sense. Now, could she deliver Michigan? Quite possibly. And if she does, it could hamper President Trump's re-election chances. That's just the way it is. That used to be the main reason people picked VPs, by the way, to get a particular state or two. The daily split screen between President Donald Trump and the nation's governors over the coronavirus pandemic is advancing the political fortunes of a handful of Democrats, state leaders, by contrasting their management. Now, this is the article's, Politico's word, their management of the crisis with the president's disjointed response to it. Now, there's no bias there, is there? No bias there. And they talk about boycotting. That we've been talking about a story about that yesterday. We're going to expand upon that on an opinion piece here in just a moment. But, boycotting the president's pressers. But you don't hear anybody saying, oh, we need to boycott Cuomo's pressers or Governor Newsom's pressers. No, because they're liberal Democrats, and the mainstream media is by and large controlled by liberal Democrats. But the Democratic governors aren't just having a moment. They are having a moment or a movement. They are signs that they may be shaping the party's pipeline of prospective presidential candidates for years to come. Years to come. So they're saying 2024. Now, Cuomo has already come out. He did in an interview with his brother, who actually has the coronavirus. Our prayers go out to Mr. Cuomo from CNN. I don't wish any of that on anybody. I don't like the dude, but I don't wish him any ill, unlike they sometimes wish us some. They're praying for us, right? Nancy Pelosi, I bet she prays for me, right? I doubt it not. But they're already talking about 2024. Well, Andrew told his brother Chris that he's not running. Now, he didn't say that he wouldn't, like to be drafted, shed Biden, fade. But 2024, they're already ready for 2024. Said Doug Herman, and does that mean that they're cashing in on 2020? They're throwing in their chips or the towel? Probably. Said Doug Herman, a Democratic strategist, when you've got governors with stratospheric approval ratings for their handling of the crisis and ratings that are 20 to 30 points higher than the president's, maybe that's true. And you have governors from, how did that work for Hillary Clinton? And you had governors from states like California and New York and Illinois leading the crisis response, all big name major league governors. You're going to see that leadership reflected in the polls for the presidency in future elections. That's probably true. This is the kind of stuff that gets forged and built into your resume. Well, how about the fact that their states were ill prepared for this coronavirus? No one seems to want to talk about that in the media. And I talked about that the other day on a show. If you want to watch our podcast, the easiest way to do it is go directly to John Martin Talks Facebook page, like it, and share it with others. Of course, you can look at our YouTube channel. We've got it up to speed now every day, and we're getting more subscribers by the minute. I appreciate that. And you can watch us through America's Voice News on Roku, Fire Stick, Amazon, all that type of stuff. Pluto TV, a new streaming channel that is picked up on all those streaming channels. And we are now on Dish Network, channel 219, all through America's Voice News. So check it out. And they're archiving our shows on their website, along with a host of other shows that I'm honored to be with. But the governors were ill prepared for the crisis. As I said the other day, like Florida, we know that we're susceptible to hurricanes. So our governors have prepared us, especially the last couple, Scott and now Ron DeSantis, have prepared us in case it happens. That doesn't mean we don't have FEMA help, but we are essentially prepared. There's plenty of evidence that New York was not prepared for anything like this pandemic, even though they were susceptible to germ warfare, to dirty bombs, to everything. One thing about New York, they are the prime target, really. That's why those Twin Towers came down there. So New York should be probably more prepared than any other state, let alone the city of New York, in the world, because they are a prime target. And there's plenty of evidence that they simply were not prepared for that. And even like Gavin Newsom, they shelved a lot of their stuff out in California. They had opportunities to buy ventilators and everything, and they didn't. But then again, as what's love got to do with it? Well, I would say, what's the truth got to do with it? Because the truth, they don't want to get to the truth. The mainstream media is going to portray these governors as all that in a bag of chips. And I'm not saying that some of them don't deserve that praise, but it's not like they were doing their jobs that well before all this happened. In their response to the virus spread, governors across the country are issuing stay-at-home orders. Our governor just issued one that takes effect essentially today, Friday. Orders closing businesses and marshaling unprecedented health care efforts in their states. People who do not follow the politics are turning into live stream of their governors for the first time. That's probably true. And learning the names of governors of other states. Well, I thought they were just spending their time slamming the president because he said they weren't prepared, And here's the thing. There are people now, and this is one of the reasons why they being the mainstream media don't want President Trump to keep being on these pressers and covering it live. Talk more about that in just a minute, because there are people now that are watching that have never watched before. And they're probably watching shows like JMT. Well, first of all, where you've been, certainly welcome. You're in the politically incorrect place right here. But the truth you will get on this show for sure. But there are people watching the President of the United States and these governors for the first time, really. I know that's hard for some people to believe, but it's true. And they may be getting truly woke, which would be dangerous for the Democrats. Things like this give them, talking about the governors, a chance to shine and for people to become household names. Cuomo household name. I do think it's a moment in which a number have stepped forward in a way to burnish credentials to their national leaders. And this is coming to you from Jim Hodges, a former governor, Democratic governor of South Carolina. I didn't know there were that many Democratic governors of South Carolina. But so this governor is saying that it works. All this attention from the coronavirus, press conferences, that kind of thing is working for these people. And one thing I'd say, it don't seem to be working for old Joe Biden, bloated Joe, man. He's floating around out there, and that's why they're grabbing to him, because they drowned him. But old Joe, man, he's not getting a whole lot of traction with his podcast. I bet my podcast is doing better than his. Nowhere is that more obvious than in the New York, where Cuomo's favorability rating rocketed to 71%, up 21 percentage points in the last month. Trump himself, and this is true, mused that Cuomo would be a tougher rival than Joe Biden. Well, he's trying to throw a little shade in the game, President Trump. He's good for that. He really knows what he's doing. But as I say, Cuomo may have said he's not running, but he would be willing to probably be drafted, don't you think? Check the time. We're doing all right. Governor Gavin Newsom of California is also getting in an introduction to national audience. Doctors are closely watching California, where Newsom issued the nation's first statewide stay-at-home mandate, and are cautiously optimistic that efforts there may help to suppress a surge in infections. Well, Newsom, you may recall, didn't get a whole lot of attention. You won't hear it repeated very often. But Newsom actually, after a phone call with President Trump last week, I think, and time moves pretty fast, he actually praised the president, and he said that he got everything that he wanted and expected out of the federal government through President Trump. Pretty high praise indeed. Trump's criticism of Whitmer, that's the lady from Michigan, the governor may have done more to boost her national profile, that's probably true, than the Democratic response she gave at the State of the Union speech. Did you even remember that? I mean, so President Trump boosted her. And earlier this year, Joe's VP, I'm beginning to think that he may in fact pick her. Now, what's that going to do if he doesn't pick a woman of color? Imagine that of all the wokeness, the correctness, all that kind of stuff of the 2020 Democratic primary, that we end up with an old Joe, so senile rocking chair Joe, and a white woman. I mean, that, I don't know. If it doesn't matter that much to me, but if you're one of the woke Democrats out there, does that matter to you? I don't know. Recent election cycles have been agonizing for current and former governors who aspire to be president, a class of politicians who once ascended regularly to the White House. That's true. Governors, think about Reagan, there have been a lot of great, governors for president. But whose stars have faded in a Washington-centric world. That is very true. Especially in the Democratic Party, they become so woke that only people who deal on these national feel-good issues like, open borders and a welfare state. You won't hear too many governors actually calling for that, especially if they're on a border. And this whole diversity type stuff. Most governors are trying to run their state and worried about the economy. The Democrats that have been running for president lately don't seem to give two hoots about the economy. And governors do make good presidents. How about our governor right here in Florida, Ron DeSantis? I expect that his name will pop up for 2024. And if not then, by the next time. I think he's doing fairly well. And, why will governors dominate in 24? Because they are getting this publicity. But I don't know, does it last? I mean, 4 more years of Donald Trump. There you go, 4 more years of Donald Trump. I mean, these governors, people's memories fade pretty fast. So I don't know if it will hold popularity after 2020. I do think there will be a push to get Cuomo drafted into the Democratic convention, which is probably not going to happen except electronically. And Joe ain't going to fare too well there. I don't think he knows what all them knobs and tubes are. All right, let me check my time. We got enough time to cover this next story. And this comes to you from Politico, and it's an opinion piece by a guy named Jack Schaefer, who is Politico's senior media writer. I don't know that much about him, but if he's the senior media writer at Politico, he's absolutely a leftist. There's just no doubt about that. When it comes to Trump, media shouldn't keep its distance. The clamor to boycott the president's briefings violates the basic journalistic rule to be where the action is. So what he's talking about is there's this push now in the mainstream liberal media to not cover the president's daily pressers of the virus updates, the task force updates, and they don't want to do that because they think it's giving President Trump too much opportunity to shine. And so there's a big push within Democratic circles, certainly, and certainly the mainstream media, which are basically all the same, to stop that or to at least limit it in some way. And this gentleman here is saying that is a mistake. So he's saying, let me read that again. The clamor to boycott the president's briefing violates the basic journalistic rule to be where the action is. Is he saying that they should do their jobs? Yeah, that's what he sounds to be saying. I'm not so sure that he's not being a bit naive, because I don't think doing their jobs is really high on their list. Or the definition of what their job is probably different. Let's go on. But since the plague struck America, talking about coronavirus, and President Donald Trump has taken to hosting more than a dozen televised briefings from his coronavirus task force, a new objection has gained purchase. They're basically saying that these are the new Trump rallies. And, I can't totally disagree with them on that, because MAGA people are paying attention, and people who haven't watched Donald Trump rally once are starting to see this. He's averaging, about 12 million people watching these every day. That's one of the stats I showed. It's freaking them out, I can tell you that. Leading the pack of objectors are journalist James Fallows and J School professor Jay Rosen. That's a lot of J's. Who would have the cable news network stop airing Trump's briefings live because they're unfiltered, in their words, propaganda. So the media wants to filter what the president says. They're admitting this right here in this article. He's telling you that the media wants to filter what you see. Now let me take a little sip on this. I'm John Martin, not Dean Martin, so it's some type of diet soda. I would reveal it, but they got to pay me maybe. I don't know. In case you haven't read this, it says, this is a cup from my darling wife on her last trip to D.C. about a year ago. It says, I want you on my side of the wall. And it has hearts and Donald Trump. Much love going out there. But the media wants to filter what the president says. Do you wonder why he's always tweeting all the time? Now, I hear so many people say, I love President Trump, but I wish he wouldn't tweet so much. he tweets, and maybe there's a case to be made for that, but it's the only way for him to get his unfiltered message out to the public. That's why he does it as much as anything. Plus, I think he loves jabbing people. I mean, he is a puncher, by the way. No, President Trump, man, he reminds me of some of the guys I grew up with. You know, that they counter punchers. They don't take a whole lot of crap. And you hit them once, you're gonna get hit twice back. Follows, one of these people that the writer was talking about, has even circulated a Twitter petition backing their proposal. In other words, they want a petition to, I guess, within the media people, or maybe they're trying to show their fans, if they have any, that they need less Trump. Washington Post media columnist Margaret Sullivan, MSNBC anchor Rachel Maddow, and others concur. Well, let me tell you, Rachel, and others that concur, be careful what you wish for. Because I'm telling you right now, the only thing keeping you people afloat is DJT. There's a reason why the New York Times, had a spike in readership. Donald Trump is responsible for that. Nobody would watch you, Miss Maddow, or very few would, if you weren't bashing President Trump. I mean, she kept the Russian hoax literally kept her show going for a couple of years. So be very, very careful what you wish for, because without Donald Trump, why would anybody watch what you guys are saying? I mean, it just does. They think this thing through. Meanwhile, journalist Jonathan Atler and broadcaster Soledad O'Brien, I haven't heard much from her lately. What the political press corps, which ordinarily dominate the briefings, they want them to step aside. They want people who normally go there to boycott the president in the press briefing room. Step aside and check this out. They want to let science and health reporters take the lead in questioning the president at these briefings. Like that's never been done before. It's interesting to me how that Donald Trump, they want to treat the President Trump different than any other president before. And he is different than any other one before, but there's certain things that should be norms. Like you should actually have real charges to impeach someone, but that's another story. But why does everything have to be differently treated in the Trump era? I don't ever remember a bevy of scientific reporters, I guess they're out there, hammering Obama about questions, especially when he had the virus that, that happened under his presidency. That never happened. Let me just ask you this. If Obama was the president right now, thank God he's not, but if he was, don't you think they would run his pressers in a continuous loop? I mean, literally 24/7, all the time. It'd be Obama News Network, right? So I had this idea. If you just tuned in the show, you might not have seen this, but I got a little bit of a compromise for them. If they want to do away with some of President Trump's pressers, or if they want to cut it back, and anybody who's for that should be forced to watch a certain video on a continuous loop. If they'd be willing to do that, like people like Rachel Maddow and anyone who's backing Joe Biden should actually have to watch this video right here on a continuous loop. Check it out.
And by the way, I got hairy legs that turn turn blonde in the sun. And the kids used to come up and reach in the pool and rub my leg down so it was straight, and then watch the hair come back up again. They look at it. So I learned about roaches. I learned about kids jumping on my lap. And I've loved kids jumping on my lap.
Roaches and kids jumping on his lap, which are one and the same, by the way. He's talking about children of color. No one ever seems to ask that. That's the guy you want for president. So if you're tired of Trump and you want to put Biden in his place, then you should have to watch that at least for like a week straight. No less than 72 hours. They, tape your eyes open like that where you can't, and slap you around, sleep deprivation. You should watch that for at least a week and then tell me you're still for Joe Biden. Finally, the Washington Post, the New York Times, and CNBC are temporarily boycotting the briefings because they are bereft of news. Well, if you don't want to go, then don't go. I would say to the president, why don't you invite other people in. Bring in Breitbart reporters. Bring in America's Voice News. Hey, I'll go up there and ask a few questions. I guarantee you I'm better than like Jim Acosta. So, if they don't want to show up, there are people that would show up. I saw a story, I started to cover it, where I think it's One News Network, ONN, that they're supposedly very pro-Trump. I don't know. I mainly tune in to America's Voice News. I'm not knocking them, but the ONN. But they were being at some press briefings, and now the Washington Press, the Washington Correspondents Group, whatever they puts on that dinner, they have now banned them from coming in. They voted. I didn't know they had that level of control because supposedly their reporter was not paying attention to social distancing regulations. What was happening, well, I think as a late female reporter, she wasn't given a seat. So she sat in the back of the room or stood in the back of the room away from everybody. I watched some of the videos. She wasn't like she was close to anybody. And the president had the audacity to call on her a couple of times, and they don't like it. It's just that simple. So, the press is controlling it. So, Mr. President, if you're listening, bring America's Voice News up there. Me and Billy Bob will come up there and ask you some questions. But is a blackout or even a brownout, according to this writer, the best way to counter the current Trump oversupply? He says, I don't think so. He says, perhaps we shouldn't report on politicians' children until they reach the age of consent. Perhaps it's good policy to avoid naming sexual assault accusers or news accounts and so on in their news. And hey, I totally agree. I am surprised. Now, this is the part, we only got a minute left. All right, let me just close with this. This guy's basically saying that the news reporters should want to cover the news and the truth. That's not what they want in the Trump derangement syndrome. They're all about trying to bash the president, and they don't want you, the voters, to be truly woke. I hope you've enjoyed the show as much as I've enjoyed bringing it to you. Please go directly to John Martin Talks Facebook page, like it, and share it with others. I'll pray for your family. You pray for mine. Have a great weekend, but above all else, like I say each and every day, from my heart, from my family to yours, have a blessed day.